So as I get started today, I'm just so excited to be here and to be able to share with everyone the connections between historical office practice, like the shorthand that you see scrolling across the title slide there, and that connection to print. And my own connection to print really begins in the fall of 2019 when I attended my first Ways Goose at the Hamilton Wood Type and Printing Museum. And I came to that Ways Goose as an academic because, as you heard in my introduction, I teach at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, but I teach business communication. And so as I came to this Ways Goose, I was thinking about my own academic research, which is really focused on workplace writing. And so I really enjoy this advertisement for IBM electric typewriters from a mid-20th century perspective, because I think it really shows what I'm interested in, which is that workflow of communication within the office workplace historically. And here you have an image of a secretary, and she has her steno notebook with that shorthand that she would have used to take dictation as she's going back to the typewriter to format and circulate it within the business. But I'm really interested where her voice perhaps shone through in some of those workplace documents. And more importantly, in what ways the secretary, as part of the workflow in the office, was able to enable the quote unquote image of the boss through these systematic language practices. And so that's my academic perspective coming through. And as I left Ways Goose, I was wondering, well, are there ways for me to sort of pivot my research and bring it to new audiences in a more visual way? And so that's what I did. I went home, and within my first week, I was able to find my own proof press. And I literally went on Facebook Marketplace and found one. It's a 120-year-old challenge proof press. And it took some time for me to develop my process because it's a great press. It's, lightweight and easy to move around and fairly simple to use. But I really had to think about what my own process looked like. And I was ready to start in the fall of 2021 when I launched Water Cooler Press. So as I thought about what kind of art I would want to make, I went back to my research, and at the time I was working with an archive, an online archive of memos from the late 1970s. And as I was looking at these memos, one thing sort of popped out to me from a language perspective, which is, and I'll highlight it here on the screen for everyone, but this phrase that's called "this is a business office." And what struck me about this phrase is that it was coming from two different managers. So, if you really stop and think about it, I wondered, is this a glimpse of the secretary's voice made visible? Because this is coming from two different people, technically. So I took that phrase and translated it back into shorthand to try to emphasize the voice of the secretary. And so this is the image of the hand-carved wood plate that then was used in the production of my letterpress art print that I called "This is a Business Office." And everything really came full circle for me when I had the amazing opportunity to be included in the New Impressions 2022 exhibition at the Hamilton. And on top of it all, I won the Virtual People's Choice Award. So that was just such an amazing experience. And so if I'm using shorthand in my art, I feel like it's important to also try to educate others on that language and to think about ways that people, can use it themselves and, think about that as a system. And so this is what I call my Steno Notebook project. And so I letterpress print these notebooks. And again, I design them in the aesthetic of that mid-century time period, complete with a red rubber band, which was advice given to secretaries at the time to keep everything organized. And then I encourage people to use those steno notebooks as I teach different lessons on shorthand on Instagram. And so I'll just bring up a couple of different examples there on the screen. So again, trying to share with others what shorthand is and, in what ways they can think about it themselves. I also spend a lot of time on eBay trying to find some different pieces that I can bring in from that mid-century aesthetic. And so here is one of my favorites where we have a frazzled secretary trying to take dictation from the boss on her steno notepad. And so another example of those images I try to incorporate but with finished products is this image of a greeting card that I created with what I like to call my secretary. And in the foreground is the shorthand for, "Hey, have you heard?" And here's another image I really enjoy, another greeting card, which is a birthday cake. It looks like something you would see in a break room, perhaps, with the foreground, again, shorthand for happy birthday. Besides letterpress, though, I've also more recently been exploring ways to create prints using the actual duplication methods that secretaries would have used. And so here on the screen, you can see I was at a workshop led by Rich Dana. I think we're going to share his information. It was really a great experience, and I was able to actually pull prints off of a vintage Gestetner mimeograph. And of course, I do not have my own Gestetner mimeograph in my studio, but I was so inspired that I went home and tried to create my own DIY version, again, using Rich Dana's materials, and that's what that reel shows there. And the process created this product, which is a use your voice art print, and the entire print is mimeographed. And so I'm using that process that secretaries would have used. Also, the longhand English words in typewriter there were also created with a vintage Olivetti typewriter. And so again, I try to use all of those tools and techniques from that time period. I also have been playing around with something as basic as a rubber stamp because, of course, they were used a lot historically and they still are at times today. So this was a patriotic use your voice midterm election pin from last year. And most recently, I've been really interested in hectography as a process. And so here's a reel of me with my own DIY approach. And a hectograph, if you're not familiar with it, is basically a pre-ditto process. So if you think back to copies you may have received that were lavender in color and had a lovely toxic smell, that's basically the same process, but a hectograph was sort of before the ditto machine. The ditto was more mechanical. But using a hectograph, I avoid that toxicity, so that's a plus. If you're interested in how to create your own hectograph, again, Rich Dana is a great resource, but also there's a great blog post from the University of Iowa, which is where he's at, that goes through those steps for you. The product that I've created with that process is what I like to call the Writer's Pocket Secretary. This is based off of a vintage little notebook that I found in a long shuttered general store. And I tried to, again, use the tools of that era to create the lettering for it, the design of it. But inside, the other neat thing is that I tried to keep the production of it the same, the use of it the same. So the inside is perforated each page. And so they're kind of like little tickets that you can tear out, these little stubs that you can use. So I want to make sure I stay in my time, but I want to thank you for listening. And if you would like to be a part of my story, or if you think there's a connection to your story, please reach out. Thank you.